Hey everyone, how are you doing? Welcome to the Old West Archive. If you enjoy true and fascinating Wild West stories, don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's jump into today's story.
Should have been watching her that way. A weathered man down on one knee in the summer heat, gaze locked on a young woman perched with both legs thrown over a sun-scorched boulder. From far off, it looked like something a righteous town would never forgive. Hot wind pushed dead weeds across the open ground outside Laramie, Wyoming Territory, and Cole Hargrove didn't budge. His horse lingered behind him, reins hanging loose, ears twitching against the flies. The old barn sat silent in the distance, and the young woman before him was trembling from somewhere deep. She'd been running since before the sky turned pink, twice over. She had gone down hard more than once and nearly given up, but terror has a strange way of pulling a body upright when everything else has already quit. Bare feet through wire fences and brittle scrub brush, and by the time she collapsed onto that rock, it wasn't a choice anymore. Her legs had simply made the decision for her. Her dress was split across the back, thin cloth hanging open where it had no business being open. One knee had swollen dark, the skin raw and scraped clean, her bare feet caked with pale dust. She tried to gather the fabric around herself, but her fingers kept shaking too bad to manage it. Cole stayed where he was. Gave her room, let the silence do what words couldn't. He had seen damage before. The war had given him a thorough education in what one man could do to another, and what silence could build when decent men chose to look the other direction. But this felt different, quieter, colder in a way fire couldn't fix. The young woman swallowed hard. Her eyes flicked toward him once, then away again fast. She had that look people get when they've learned to brace themselves around strangers, like whatever came next would be something they'd have to survive. Cole peeled off his coat slowly and extended it toward her, not stepping any closer. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and unhurried, "nothing bad is going to happen to you right now." She hesitated. Then, with a sharp, desperate motion, she turned just enough to let him see what was along her side and back. The bruises ran deep, dark, old and new both. Her voice barely made it out. "See for yourself," Cole looked. And everything inside him shifted. Not anything improper. Not fascination. Something closer to recognition. The kind a field surgeon learns to carry like a stone in his chest. These weren't the marks of a fall. These were a record. A long and deliberate one. His jaw went tight. Not from shock, he was past shock. From the weight of knowing exactly what he was looking at. He stepped back, giving her more space, then set the coat on the rock beside her instead of draping it over her shoulders. She pulled it around herself like it was armor. "Who?" Cole asked quietly. She didn't answer right off. Her lips moved without sound first. Her eyes filled with something that wasn't just pain. It was the kind of fear that had taken up permanent residence. Then came the name, barely above a whisper. Denton Voss. The hot wind rolled through the dry grass. Somewhere distant, a fence post groaned. Cole's eyes drifted toward the road cutting through the flat land. If that name was real, then nothing about this afternoon was finished. He looked back at the young woman on the boulder, still shaking, still holding herself together under a stranger's coat. And something moved inside him that he had buried deep after the war came home with him. A sense of obligation. The kind that won't let you sleep. Because if what he'd seen was real, somebody was already coming, and they wouldn't come asking nicely. The question wasn't whether she was telling the truth. The question was this. When that man showed up to drag her back, would Cole step aside like every other person in her life already had? Or would he finally plant himself on the right side of something and refuse to move? Cole didn't press her. Men who pushed too fast were usually hiding something. He walked to the well instead, drew water into a tin cup and set it down halfway between them. Close enough for her to reach without coming to him. She took it. Both hands wrapped around it tight, water running down her chin. She didn't seem to notice. That told him plenty. Ruth Calloway came riding in not long after, moving slow the way she always did, like the land itself had taught her patience. Her eyes were quick and sharp, taking in the young woman and then Cole in one single sweep. She didn't waste words on questions that didn't need asking. "Inside," she said simply. Cole stayed near the door while Ruth guided the girl into the cool shadow of the barn. He heard low voices for a while. Then silence. Then one brief, muffled sob that stopped itself short. The ones with the most left inside them cried fast and then squared their shoulders. Ruth came back out a few minutes later, drying her hands on her apron. It's real bad, she said. Cole didn't ask for more. He could already fill in what she meant. Ruth dropped her voice further. Wasn't an accident. And it wasn't the first time either. Cole exhaled through his nose. He'd heard sentences shaped just like that one before. Different geography, different names, same story underneath. Inside, the young woman, Clara was what she finally offered, sat curled inside his coat like she was trying to take up less room in the world. Cole crouched near the entrance, far enough away not to crowd her. You got people somewhere else? He asked. Family outside this county? She shook her head slowly. Married, she said. The word came out flat, like it explained everything and nothing. Cole didn't react fast. He sat with it a moment. Your husband the one who did this? Another shake. Then the quietest voice he'd heard in a long time. He don't stop it. That landed harder than a fist would have. Cole leaned back a little, breathed, then asked again for the name. Denton Voss. He knew it. Anybody who'd spent time within a half-day's ride of Laramie knew it. Not the kind of name that came with a reputation worth having. The kind folks avoided mentioning in mixed company. Ruth crossed her arms. That whole family's been rotten since before the boy was grown? Clara looked at the floor. He told me if I left, he'd say I robbed him. Said not a soul would take my word over his. Cole let a quiet, tired sort of smile cross his face. Men like that always figure they're the only one who gets to tell the story, he said. He rose up to his full height, brushed the dust from his vest. Let's see how his version holds up in front of the sheriff. Clara looked up fast, alarm crossing her face. He'll ride after me. Cole glanced out at the long, flat land baking under the afternoon sun. Something shifted at the far edge of the road. Heat shimmer, maybe. Or maybe not. Yeah, Cole said plainly. He will. He rested one hand near his holster. Not drawing. Just reminding himself it was there. Some stories didn't stay buried. They rode in. 3 riders came into view, slow and deliberate. No skulking, no rushing. Just a straight approach down that dusty road, like men who expected the world to get out of their way. They had followed the trail. Bare footprints in dry dirt don't disappear quickly. Cole stood in the middle of the yard, one hand loose near his gun, the other hanging easy at his side. He didn't call out. Men arriving like this weren't coming for conversation. Behind him, inside the barn, Clara went completely still. Ruth leaned close to her, murmuring something steady and quiet. Cole kept his eyes on the road. The lead rider came into full view. Tall, long, sitting that horse like he'd been assembled on top of it. Denton Voss. No badge, no urgency. An old scar traced one cheekbone, pale and permanent, the kind a man earned in bad circumstances and never once mentioned. He wore the expression of someone who'd decided long ago that the world owed him deference. The other 2 fanned out slightly as they closed the distance. Not clever men, but obedient ones. Voss brought his horse to a stop several yards short. Didn't dismount. Didn't need to establish dominance any other way. You've got property on this land that belongs to my kin, he said. His voice was even. That was the unsettling part. Cole didn't step forward. Only thing on this land, he said, is what decided to stay here. Voss gave a thin smile. Girl's married. I suspect you understand how that works. Cole tilted his head slightly. Funny thing, marriage don't usually leave marks like the ones I saw. One of the riders behind Voss snorted. Wrong decision. Voss didn't turn, but the sound died immediately. Voss leaned forward in the saddle. You don't know the full picture, he said. Cole nodded once. You're probably right, he agreed. So let's go into town and tell it to somebody who can sort it out properly. Something flickered across Voss's face. Barely anything, but it was there. No reason to drag the town into a family matter, he said. Inside the barn, a boot shifted on the wood floor. Clara was still listening. Cole took one slow step sideways, positioning himself squarely between the riders and the barn door. Then I'd suggest you turn those horses around, he said, before this gets considerably louder than you came prepared for. Voss studied him now. Taking real stock of him. An older man, hands relaxed, eyes steady, with no fear worth mentioning. That bothered him more than a drawn weapon would have. Without a word from Voss, one of the hired men dropped off his horse and started moving toward the barn at a quick stride. Cole moved first. Not explosive. Precise. He grabbed the handle of a long-handled shovel leaning against the fence post and brought it down in a sharp arc. Caught the man clean across the wrist. Metal on bone. The knife hit the dirt. The second man came in from the right. Cole turned into it, took the blow across his shoulder, then drove his elbow back with enough force to send the man stumbling hard into the water trough. The pain lit up his arm sharp enough to remind him his body wasn't what it was at 20. Water sprayed up. The horse sidestepped. Dust billowed. Voss didn't move. He watched. He was the kind of man who used other men up first and only committed himself when the math looked right. Then, deliberately and without hurry, he let his hand settle onto the grip of his gun. Cole saw it. He didn't draw his own, because the instant that happened, there was nothing left to talk about. And somewhere just behind him, a young woman was barely breathing, waiting to see what kind of man Cole Hargrove actually turned out to be when things went to the edge. So the question wasn't whether Voss would draw, the question was whether Cole would act first or wait one moment too long. Cole didn't pull the trigger, not yet. His hand stayed near the iron, but his eyes stayed fixed on Voss. Men like Denton Voss were built for exactly this kind of standoff. They needed the other man to flinch first. It justified everything that came after. Cole had watched that game get played out across 2 years of war. Young men with fast hands and clean consciences who thought speed made them righteous. It hadn't. It just meant they finished being wrong a little sooner. Voss let the silence stretch. Then slowly his hand came back off the grip. Just an inch. Not retreat. An invitation to believe it was over. "You're turning a small thing into something it doesn't have to be," he said. Cole let out a quiet breath through his nose. "You're the one who made it this size," he answered. Behind him, Clara shifted again. That small sound said everything. Voss heard it. His eyes tracked toward the barn doorway. And there it was, plain as sunburn that need to own. Not land, not horses, people. "My brother's wife belongs home," Voss said, his voice a degree tighter now. Cole nodded once. "Your brother isn't here," he said. Voss's jaw moved like he was chewing on something he hadn't expected to taste. Cole made his move then. Not a violent one. He stepped back. Deliberate, unhurried, the step of a man making a decision rather than retreating from one. "Here's how this goes," he said. "We all ride to Laramie. You bring your brother. Clara speaks her piece to the sheriff. The law handles what comes next." One of the men on the ground groaned, clutching his wrist. The other stayed put beside the trough, dripping, not eager to try anything else. Voss looked at them both. Then back at Cole. He didn't like what the numbers said. Not in daylight. Not with a witness like Ruth Calloway already standing in the barn doorway with her arms folded. "Fine," Voss said at last. The word came out wrong. Not like agreement. Like a man who had just decided to change the battlefield. Cole caught that. So did Ruth. Clara's grip tightened on the coat wrapped around her, but she said nothing. They moved quickly after that. Horses turned. Dust lifted and rolled. Cole kept Voss in his line of sight the entire way. Men of that breed didn't accept defeat. They simply relocated it. The ride into town was long enough for a fabricated story to pick up speed and find its footing. And by the time Laramie's main street came into view, something already felt wrong about the air. Too still. Too arranged. Voss didn't look like a man riding into uncertainty anymore. He looked like a man arriving somewhere he'd already been. At the sheriff's office, sitting on the bench outside with his hat turning slow circles in his hands and his eyes on the ground, was a man Cole didn't recognize, but Clara clearly did. Her entire body went rigid. Her husband. Already there. Already waiting. This hadn't been a chase at all. Voss had never been behind her. He'd been in front of her the whole time. Which meant the story already being told inside that office wasn't Clara's story. Someone else had gotten there first and planted the version they needed. The question now was the hardest kind. When a lie gets told first in a town where everyone already knows the family's name, how do you pull the truth back up before it gets buried under the weight of it? The inside of the sheriff's office was close and warm. The kind of room where words stayed and settled. Eli sat in the corner, eyes down, hands moving restless in his lap. He looked like a man rehearsing something he wasn't sure he believed anymore. He glanced once at Voss, then stared back at the floor. Clara nearly came undone right there. Not from pain. From watching the truth get crowded out before she even had a chance to speak it. Cole didn't raise his voice. Didn't slam anything down on the desk. He'd learned a long time ago that the loudest man in the room rarely had the most to say. He spoke plain, clean, factual, what he had seen when he found her. What condition she was in. What Ruth Calloway had observed and could testify to without hesitation. He laid it out piece by piece like a man building something that needed to stand on its own. Sheriff Aldridge listened the way a good lawman listens, not for what he wanted to hear, but for what didn't fit. And Eli, sitting there in that corner with the weight of however many silent years pressing down on him, started to crack. Not all the way. Not clean or easy. But enough. His voice came out rough and cracked when it finally came, and in it was something a fabricated story never carries convincingly. Exhaustion. The particular worn-out sound of a man who is tired of being afraid of his own family. That was enough to start the unraveling. The rest followed. Documents, inconsistencies. A fire that had been set to burn evidence and ended up burning away the lie instead. Sheriff Aldridge didn't need a full written confession. He had enough to hold Denton Voss. When Voss tried one last time to reshape the narrative in that room, nobody turned to look at him. By the time the sun hit the tops of the buildings outside, Denton Voss was no longer a free man. And Clara, for the first time since she could clearly remember, didn't look over her shoulder when she walked through a doorway. Weeks went by, then months. The land stayed unchanged, same dry heat, same long evenings, same silence that asked nothing of you. But Clara changed inside of it. She stood with more height in her spine. She spoke to people directly, without flinching. She worked alongside Ruth and learned the rhythms of a place that didn't ask her to make herself small. And Cole stayed what he had always been. Patient, present, never pressing for more than she was ready to offer. One evening, when the sun was bleeding orange across the same stretch of ground where everything had started, Clara stood beside him and didn't say anything for a while. Then quietly, "That day I told you to look. I thought I was showing you something that had been destroyed." Cole gave a small nod. "Now I think," she continued, "I was showing you what was still fighting to survive." Cole was quiet for a moment. "Not many people get a second chance at that," he said. She turned to look at him. Not with fear, not with hesitation, just with the plain and steady eyes of someone who had earned the right to make her own choices. She didn't reach for his hand right away. She just stood there next to him, present and unafraid. And for the first time, that was more than enough. No urgency. No debt owed. Just a choice made freely. And maybe that's the part worth holding on to. Not who rides in to help, but who stays long enough to let you find your own footing again. Now I'll be straight with you. Stories like this one don't arrive wrapped up neat and clean. They get gathered and remembered and shaped sometimes so the lesson can be seen through the dust. The images you're looking at are created to help you feel it, not just follow it. If this isn't your kind of story, no hard feelings. Go rest, take care of yourself, and we'll cross paths some other time. But if it stuck with you, even for just a minute, then sit with it a little longer. Tell me where you're listening from and what the time is wherever you are. I genuinely like knowing who's out there on the other end of these stories. And ask yourself this. If you had been standing in that yard when those riders came down the road, which way would you have gone? If this one meant something to you, go ahead and like it and subscribe. There's plenty more worth telling. And I'll be right here when you're ready for the next one. You said, if I send you the story in parts, can you create realistic human scene image prompts for each scene?